The Norfolk coast has always been treacherous for seafarers, and the Haysborough Sands has been cause for disaster for hundreds of vessels and claimed countless of lives. On the 20th of December 1770, HMS Peggy, a 141-ton sloop under the command of Captain Richard Toby, had taken on board newly conscripted pressmen at Newcastle only 2 days earlier. As she sailed along the Norfolk coast, the wind changed to a nor'easter, and as darkness fell and amid squalls of snow, she was driven towards the shore. Orders were given to throw the casks of beer and water overboard, and to cut away the main mast and let the sheet anchor go, but sadly, it was all just too late. The Peggy ran aground near Town Gap. The waves beat over her, and it was not until noon, when the tide had ebbed, that John Shepherd, bailiff of the manor of Happisburgh, together with a number of villagers, could bring horse-drawn wagons along the beach. All the 59 survivors were taken to safety and found shelter, but 32 members of the ship's company perished and lie buried here in Haysborough churchyard. Much of the cargo was salvaged, but the wreck of the Peggy remained half buried in the sand at the high water mark for many years. But the most famous loss was that of HMS Invincible on Monday the 16th of March in 1801. HMS Invincible was a third-rate 74-gun ship, and it had sailed out of Yarmouth heavily laden with ordnance, ammunition, stores, and nearly 600 men on her way to join the Baltic Fleet under Admiral Sir Hyde Parker and Admiral Nelson. Shortly before the Battle of Copenhagen, Rear Admiral Thomas Totty was on board the Invincible with Captain John Rennie, recently appointed to his first command. Although the pilots were thought to be acquainted with the passage through Haysborough Gate, a strong tide and a fresh wind forced Invincible off course, and at 2:30 she struck Hammond's Knoll, a sandbank just east of Haysborough Sands. The crew laboured throughout the night to save the vast vessel. All the masts were cut away and the pumps were manned continuously. The only help came from the boat the Nancy, who were fishing for cod. Admiral Totty hoarded her with the youngest crew members, and she stood by. Invincible's own boats were launched, but they were driven out to sea, and at daybreak on March the 17th, as the Nancy attempted to rescue the remainder of the crew, the Invincible sunk. Some of the men in her boats were picked up later by a collier, but out of 590 men, some 400 perished, including Captain Rennie. During the next day, bodies were washed up along the coast, and at Haysborough cartloads were gathered up and taken to the mass grave on the north side of the church. There has been no memorial that has marked the spot where 119 men were buried. This was a cause for concern for a parish member called Mary Cater. She resided in the parish during the first part of the 20th century. In 1913 she started a countrywide collection to raise funds for a suitable stone. Unfortunately, objections were raised as there was no written record of the burials which had taken place on the land. Miss Cater had no way of proving the authenticity of the burials, and all donations had to be returned. It was not until 1988, when a drainage trench was dug to take rainwater from the church, that many skeletons were found in the ground. Evidently they had been buried in haste. There was now little room for doubt. The present HMS Invincible, which is now an aircraft carrier, was contacted, and the captain responded with much interest. On the 24th of July 1998, a simple stone given jointly by the ship's company and the church council was dedicated to the memory of all from the Invincible who died at sea. Outside one part of the churchyard is a mound bereft of headstones. This is the mass grave. HMS Invincible foundered offshore in 16th of March 1801 on its way to join Nelson's fleet, and 119 of the crew members are buried here. By 1904, the Sea of Haysborough had become so cluttered with wrecks that Trinity House, afraid of more disasters, sent a diving team to blow them up. Sadly, many ships were lost during the 1939-45 war, including the Franklin, which also sank off Haysborough. 6 ships were wrecked off Haysborough Sands in 1942, and at 3:30 a.m. on the 30th of January 1940, the Air Raids Warden's Post received a report that a vessel was on fire due to enemy action about 1 mile from shore. According to a further message, the ship had stranded at Walcott Gap. There had been a drifting of snow all night, and members of the Rocket Brigade loaded the life-saving apparatus onto the trailer in order to travel by road. As they approached Walcott Gap, it was still dark, and they found the Tortmiller, a vessel weighing about 3,700 tons. Rope ladders were used to access the deck, and they found that the fire was dying down. An exhausted Latvian man was found on board, unable to speak English. Later, it was discovered that he had been knocked unconscious, and when all the crew members were told to abandon ship, he was left for dead. Rocket Brigade members kept watch over the vessel for 3 weeks until she was towed to Yarmouth for repairs. Unfortunately, the vessel was sunk by the enemy the following year. We now move away from sad tales of shipwrecks and we go on to good old English folklore. So at this church in Haysborough there is an unmarked grave said to be that of Johnathon Balls. He was an infamous serial killer of the village. The unpopular Balls died on the 20th of April 1846 at the age of 82 after being accused of a number of petty crimes. There were very few friends at his funeral and he had lost many of his family members already. It appears Mr. Balls was prepared for all eventualities, whether his soul went upwards to heaven or downwards to hell, by having an assortment of items buried with him, including a Bible, a plum cake, a poker and coal tongs. Johnathon was the latest in a line of family members who all died in the same way. Previously healthy relatives suddenly had chest pain and vomiting and they died soon after. Granddaughter Anne Pegg, aged 8, died in June 1830. 5 years after that, Anne in July 1835. Daughter Maria Lacey, aged 24. Granddaughter Maria Green, aged 13 months, died a year later in December 1836. Before a double tragedy in October 1841 when Jonathan's granddaughter Martha Green died aged 13 months along with her 3-year-old brother William. The grandfather and his bedridden wife Elizabeth died in December 1845 and their grandson Samuel had also died in September 1845. The locals began to talk and begged the local coroner to take action. After their third bout of campaigning, the coroner ordered an inquest, and in May 1846 he ordered the exhumation of 2 family members. Medics quickly revealed that there was enough arsenic in the stomach of both the family members that it could have poisoned the entire village of Haysborough. The matter was investigated and it was soon discovered that Johnathon had actually bought a huge quantity of arsenic, claiming it was helping to kill rats over a period of many years, during which time even more members of the family had died. The inquest went on to catalogue Ball's past crimes and pointed out his dependency on his married daughters in order to survive for the final 20 years of his life. The inquest determined that Johnathon poisoned his grandchildren so that their parents, his daughters, might be better able to support him. In addition to the many murder charges against old Balls, it is now believed that he killed his 2 sons, who had been dead more than 10 years at the time, and his father and his mother. Johnathon was believed to have killed himself as the growing rumours about his involvement in the deaths of so many family members was escalating throughout the village. A local legend says that when his body was exhumed it was found to be perfectly preserved, leading to some to believe that the old man had been a vampire. Folklore stated that evil people buried on consecrated ground could transform into vampires. So it is believed that he was taken away from the church and reburied at the crossroads.